Rare and orphan conditions and the Orphan Drugs Act of the 1980s not only opened up a sluice gate for biotech, but also, if you read the runes and you look at the data well enough, it actually allowed the productivity of pharma in the early thousands to recover from an almost break-even point. So the impact of rare and orphans is not just a today thing. It is something that is powerful and moves from biotech right up to the very biggest in our sector. So in remembering that, and in thinking about that, the BIA has been a strong and long supporter of rare diseases. Not just bringing a great community together around this, of which Deb plays a very strong part, as does Kylie Bromley, who unfortunately can't be here today, who chairs that group, but we've been putting out calls to government and others to line up, join up, gang up against this problem of rare diseases. And I'm pleased to say that the report that Deb and others helped craft has already, many of its requests, a new nice framework from our government and framework from our regulators are already starting to turn. You see that today, and that does help turn that confidence into action. And I'd like to thank those of you in the room who've given talks today to show that there is an economic benefit to this, that there is a framework of policy that we can use, and that there's a regulatory system that is here, rolling in behind us, to make sure that those barriers that were there, that everyone said, oh, well, we can't, it's too difficult because, are not going to be there in the future. So we should be confident, ladies and gentlemen, in this United Kingdom, that we have a great set of strengths. As Lawrence said this morning, in our integrated system, 70 million people across this nation who we can get to. We have a more progressive regulation coming along. We have HDRS who can help us curate and distill and make available health data, ethically consented, curated and well governed. And those tools, ladies and gentlemen, are the ones that are going to help us move the needle for patients here and worldwide. So as we move then to confidence in our ability to make these medicines and to test these medicines and then to dose these medicines, we need to be confident also that there's an economic story that investors can listen to and can respond to. And Matthew very eloquently this morning told us about the macroeconomics of this. We know that rare diseases carry 8 times the economic burden of common conditions, 8 times. But there is still a belief sometimes, and it may be just through sheer tiredness, of saying, oh, well, it's awfully hard, they're not very commercial. Now, I would like to inject a little bit of confidence that I have been imbued with from today's meeting into this room, and ask you to be confident that those rare diseases that we can address worldwide with a global market from the UK make this investable. And to help me do that with some real evidence, Deb is going to talk to you about her experience and the Alexion experience and why that model is reproducible and how we can systematize it, how we can industrialize it, how we can make sure that, as you will hear in a minute, does not happen by Brownian motion. It happens by design. So, with that starting point and due recognition for Kylie's leadership in this, she apologises for not being here today, but she deserves a great deal of our thanks for pulling that group together, along with Rosie, who's in the room here from BIA. Deb, please.
Thanks so much, Chris. And Kylie and I are both from Down Under, so in Australia we worked together way back there as well. So I hope I can represent Kylie's views here as well. But I think I wanted to start with a small story about Alexion to demonstrate the commercial viability of a specific focus on rare diseases. Sometime back in 1992, a scientist and an academic got together and decided to create a pharmaceutical company or a biotech company with a specific focus on the development of complement biology. They both had studied this in both industry for one and academia and a physician in the other space. By 1995, they had been able to identify a molecule that they thought could attract some investment, and they went public at that time point. A very successful IPO, actually. I think it was a couple of $1 million, which seems like nothing at the moment, but at that point in time, quite significant. And they embarked on a series of clinical research, not in rare diseases. First of all, in cardiovascular disease and in renal disease, lupus, big population health disease areas. And every single one of those trials failed miserably. They were able to prove that if you inhibit complement overexpression, you do reduce inflammation, but that is not a viable economic model. And so they were 6 months out from bankruptcy in the early 2000s and decided that they needed to really go back to their original intent and focus on the mode of action and really identify a disease and diseases that could benefit from complement inhibition. And they came across proximal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, or PNH, a rare blood condition, and started conversations with Peter Hillman, a professor who was based at Leeds at the time and very well known across the UK as an expert in PNH. And because Peter was well known in the UK and because there's good referral systems and good linkages across the clinical community, a lot of patients would be referred into Peter. And when I say a lot, about 100 would be referred into Peter. And so through a series of collaborations and discussions with Peter and the team at Alexion, a very small team at the time, and the FDA, there was an agreement to pursue the study in 11 patients in the UK, the first patients to receive eculizumab for this particular disease, to just get to a proof of concept. And from those 11 patients, one study, one site, so very economically sensible at a time when they were a few months out from bankruptcy. And very quickly, because Peter had studied the natural history of this disease, there was clear primary outcomes that were accepted by the FDA, that were accepted by regulators. So they were able to very quickly demonstrate the impact of this and then move to phase 2 and phase 3. The drug was commercialized in 2007 for that one condition, and then other indications followed. And this was at a time where the Orphan's Drug Act was present, and there were various regulatory incentives, which was really important for the success of this product. And I can fast forward to 2021, where AstraZeneca acquired Alexion for $31 billion. And so from those humble beginnings of almost bankruptcy to selling or being acquired in this case by a larger pharmaceutical company for $31 billion, this says that this is an economically viable business. And in the first year, well, why did AstraZeneca, a big pharmaceutical company, purchase a rare disease company? Because strategically, they see the value in rare disease investment and medicine development and commercialization. Currently, I think the first year there was total global sales in rare disease business unit reached about 7 billion. We've just done our Q1 earnings call, and the rare disease business now makes up about 15% of our global sales for AstraZeneca, and that's projected to increase actually faster at a revenue growth rate, faster than the population health ones, with the exception of oncology. I'll take oncology out of that discussion. And so increasingly, big pharma are really looking at rare disease as a strategic investment, because there is a reliable revenue stream. There are increasing incentives from regulators. We've seen MHRA today talk about how to design trials in a more iterative way. There's incentives around exclusivity. There's incentives around tax credits. There's multiple commercial reasons to do this. And from a clinical trial perspective, we do have to look at efficiencies, of course, but I think here in the UK is something, and I use that example of Leeds, those 11 patients, this idea that patients are in one location and the data sets are somewhat connected means that you can go to 1, 2, 3 or 4 sites and get the patients you need for your study in rare diseases, because smaller numbers are needed. And that's been successful for Alexion as well. In the UK, for some of our studies, we only have 2 sites, and we recruit almost half of the global patient recruitment because of that concentration in those disease areas. And the other thing I'll say about the business is that we're quite focused. You know, there's complement biology, and that came into AstraZeneca. And then across the business, we have very specific disease area focus. We know we can't be everywhere. We know we can't have a solution for everything, but we try and use that deep science to really drive a focused development program that we know is commercially viable and therefore sustainable, and keep reinvesting back into that business.
So it becomes not exactly a non-profit, but it becomes a business that you reinvest that profit, so
yes.
that you can do the next thing,
yeah.
go the next mile.
Yeah, and AstraZeneca is not specific to any company, but again, it's in our earnings reports. We reinvest about 23% of our revenue back into R&D. And that we still need to attract additional investors, of course, to progress things. But that is really critical. And so that revenue, that constant revenue stream is really important. And we heard from another session, there are fixed costs that are associated with just maintaining your work, your ongoing development is one thing, but maintaining what you have is really important as well. So that constant reinvestment back into the business is critical.
And I'm going to be asking for some questions in a minute. We've got 10 minutes, by the way, because we're going to finish 5 minutes early by request, so that you can all get to the final session next door. So we've got 10 minutes left to run. There is a lot of talk about, well, you know, the cost of making these rare disease drugs, and Matthew talked about it. You know, volume is vital in order to make this economic algorithm work. How did Alexion solve for that problem?
The first thing was finding Peter Hillman, actually, because he had about 100 patients, which at the time for this ultra-rare condition was extraordinary, and they were all diagnosed. And so we have a huge focus on supporting projects that will help to accelerate diagnosis of rare conditions. And we're trying to invest in things that are scalable also. I don't know if Peter Fisher's in the room, but we've done some work with Mendelian looking at how to flag GP records using symptoms and test results to try and surface those patients and get them referred into the right centre. Because if you have a diagnosed population, then pharma companies understand what the unmet need is. But if the patients aren't there, if they're not diagnosed, then what is the unmet need? It's so hard to quantify. And if you can quantify that, you can go to investors, you can put forward robust business cases to say the volume is there. And that's so important for securing clinical trials. It's one of the reasons that our CEO for the gene therapies that we're progressing is saying, please do the work in the UK, because the data is there, the science is there, it is connected, and we know we can rely on it from a regulatory perspective. And the patients are getting diagnosed. The emphasis on genomic medicine, I think James might be in the room from Genomics England, who has helped us extraordinarily to identify patients for our gene therapy and prove to our organisation that the patients exist in the UK, we can find them and they can get onto our clinical trials. So without that infrastructure and that diagnostic ability to connect genomics and ultimately phenotypically as well, it pinpoints those patients and they're there, and suddenly the companies go, well, the volume is there, this will work from a clinical trial all the way through to commercialisation.
Thank you. And I'm going to bring up a sort of manufacturing question now, technology question. Is there mileage in thinking about shared technology stacks between companies in rares and orphans, so that, for every new therapy they have, they're just taking the clinical risk, not the technology risk. So accessing a platform technology, whether it be cellular manufacture or whether it be siRNA manufacture, so that bit doesn't get done on a company by company by company where everyone's learning.
Yeah.
And everyone's duplicating. Is there mileage in that one?
Well, I think there is. I can't speak for the organisation, of course, but I think there is. Because if we keep looking at things on a singular basis and you own this bit and I own that bit, then, okay, we might be able to form a collaboration. But actually, if that is, and I'll go even a bit wilder here, why not have something like the NHS own those sorts of platforms? So you sort of could imagine a future where patients come into hospital, their whole genome is sequenced, but within a short period of time, there is a specific therapy that is delivered to them. They're not relying on a pharmaceutical company who owns that platform and owns that technology and is reviewing it on a single basis. So like the previous speaker, what is the commercial model? Is the question here. If we want to go to full platforms and use the full technology, it's probably not what we have today. It has to be something different. Yeah.
So within the community, a consolidation effect around singular technologies, so that the individual company that may be small, and it may be hard to find multi-millions to progress the asset, only has to take that clinical risk.
Yeah. I think manufacturing is an area of where technology is going to, with the platform technologies, is going to really change things. And one of our products, it requires the eggs of transgenic chickens, and we have a separate chicken farm that it has to be managed in a certain way to meet certain standards to then be able to be used in the manufacturing process. The yields from that are so low that the cost of goods is so high, and that's unsustainable. Now, that's a life-saving medicine. It's an ultra rare condition, and we'll continue to manufacture it and supply it because that's the right thing to do for the rare disease community. But I really hope there's a gene therapy that's going to come along for that, because that kind of manufacturing is just not sustainable. We have to look at how we can get scale and not necessarily have individual platforms owned by individual organisations.
Thanks, Deb. Now, I'm going to ask for questions. There must be questions in the room. Lots of questions. The first hand up was the gentleman at the back there, and then Second one towards the front. We've only got one mic, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Chris. Question about your focus areas. You mentioned that you've got very specific focus areas.
Yeah.
When you think about, I guess, selecting new programs in your pipeline, does that also look at targets that can apply across rare diseases as well to make that more sustainable or commercially attractive?
Yeah.
Does that fit into the equation for you guys?
It can, but it's a later choice. The focus areas that we have identified where our knowledge and where our technology is hematology, nephrology, bone conditions, metabolics to a certain extent, endocrinology, and we've got it's really in its infancy at the moment. Rare tumours is coming through, but that's because AstraZeneca has such a big focus in oncology. We're able to pair up that know-how, and that comes as the primary choice. And we're really looking for where is the unmet need in those disease areas from a rare perspective. Yeah.
So is that demand signal really well broadcast? Because I detect that we could do a better job of broadcasting those demand signals across the community that says, look, if you make one of those, they'll buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think anything we can do to, well, I think it comes from, I'm part of a global pharmaceutical company, so we look at global prevalence. And the more that we can do to diagnose patients and have that evidence to demonstrate to pharmaceutical companies, this is where you should focus. And it's not to say there's one of our products that has already 4 indications. And so the first choice has to be the one with the highest unmet need and where your product is going to show the biggest piece of value. And then the rest can follow from there. According to the investment strategy that you have. Yeah.
Great. Gentleman at the front here.
Hi, thank you. I work in the gene therapy field, and the market, so the therapies that have been marketed, the sort of field is littered with market failures. Strimbelis, Glibera, the list sort of goes on and on, which is clearly disappointing, and that's due to almost always lack of demand, so there aren't enough patients. Your model clearly is successful. Do you think there's, how would you differentiate that? How would you learn from that to actually, take it a bit broader and make other products like the ones I've mentioned and others be more successful?
I wish I had the answer to that because I might be in a different situation, but. For me, it always comes back down to, are we investing enough in diagnosis? I think the appetite in the UK is here now for the use of genomics and whole genome sequencing. I know there's a talk on after this around the My Health study, My Future Health study. I think those things are really important. But sometimes I have to ask myself, what's stopping that happening to, whole genome sequencing? Doesn't have to be every single human. Certainly the babies is really important. But so many people are going to miss out if we don't start having a targeted approach at a more population-based level. And I think the sooner that you can connect up the genetics, genotypes, phenotypes, then you start to realise, okay, there is the volume there, and then we can develop the therapies to match that. But at the moment, it's hard to say to investors, even internally in our company, we should, there's a really high unmet need, this is the situation, there's these 10 patients. It's like, okay, but what happens after that? And unless you got a different approach to what we currently have, then it won't work. But I think the diagnostics it's critical. Yeah.
So taking that diagnostic approach, data, population data, to be able to identify just how rare or not, or less rare, these conditions actually are. Because we only know what we know.
Yeah.
Right? And actually, if we look into the data, we may find the prevalence is higher than we think it is, which gives a little bit more volume.
Yeah.
Deb, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you for your
Pleasure.
story. I hope that, and thank you for your attention and your attendance this afternoon. I hope that it's given you an additional piece of confidence that by consolidation, by these focus on diagnostics and on data, which are all within our grasp now, we have the ability to make more investable stories, and the idea that rare is uninvestable and uneconomic and uncommercial will go away in the same place as undruggable targets went away until we drugged them.
I think I saw there was a recent report, Evaluate Pharma do this economic analysis every year almost, and I think I read the most recent one. By 2032, the rare disease revenue from rare disease products will be around 400 million globally, and it will make up about 15% of the top 15 pharma companies' revenue streams. So, like what you just said, absolutely there is a commercial viability here, and there is a return on investment, and there's many reasons why the UK can lead now. The infrastructure is there. If we can pull the data together, if we can get the diagnosis, then we can demonstrate that you can bring your clinical trials to the UK and you will recruit, and you can do that in an efficient and effective way, and then get the commercialisation. I think we're in good shape.
And on that fantastic note, thank you all very much. Thank you, Deb, particularly. Thank you.